Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and ladies and gentlemen, Bethesda is one of those interesting companies where a lot of goodwill has been burned, but at the end of the day, like when it comes to Bethesda titles, I still always like to give them another chance after chance. But today, it's not even about the game, it's actually just about doing the right thing. Now, when it comes to the world of video gaming, I think one of the biggest problems in AAA services are like crunch times, okay? Especially when you have big game projects like Red Dead Redemption 2, Last of Us, Doom in this case. There's a lot of crunch that happens, okay? Basically, that means throughout the entire development cycle, people get overworked, okay? There's tons of money on the line, there's tons of hours being spent, and there's a lot of passion being sort of milked out by a lot of the big AAA studios out there. And when it comes to crunch, the only people that hurt the hardest are the actual people developing the titles. Now, me personally, I don't care if it takes a game an extra few months to come out. I'd rather have a proper completed product done by people that aren't put working at gunpoint. Now, ladies and gentlemen, straight up in this case, for those of you who need a quick primer, 3 years ago, this Reddit post was made by Marty Stratton, who works at id Software. Now, Marty basically threw Mick Gordon, who designs, basically soundtracks for a lot of video games. One of my favorite, last generation, being Prey. If you've never played that game, absolutely give it a try. It's another Bethesda title. But of course, Mick Gordon was thrown under the bus by old Marty over here when it came to the actual original game soundtrack. And of course, there was centered around the original game soundtrack being used for the pre-order bonuses and of course for Doom Eternal. Now, Doom Eternal, great game, okay? But when it comes to the people working on it, whenever they get screwed, it's just bad all around. It's not even about the game, like I said at the beginning. If people get screwed during development, it just sucks entirely for the industry. This is not something that should be accepted in video game development or really any form of software development, okay? You pay people what you owe them, and you make sure that the actual treatment of them is done absolutely fairly and well, okay? Simple as that. Now, of course, over the past couple weeks, I've seen a lot of discussion centered around the release of the Doom Eternal original game soundtrack. While many fans like the OST, there is speculation and criticism around the fact that the game's talented and popular composer, Mick Gordon, edited and mixed only 12 of the 59 tracks on the OST, the remainder being edited by our lead audio designer here at id. Some have suggested that we've been careless with or disrespectful of the game music. Others have speculated that Mick wasn't given the time or creative freedom to deliver something different or better. The fact is, none of that is true. All right, so of course, what has become unacceptable to me are the direct and personal attacks on our lead audio designer. So, of course, because of a back and forth, obviously, as most gaming circles go, it gets pretty vitriolic. There's a lot of harassment and shit being thrown around. Whenever you make letters like this, people are obviously going to have threats sent to them. They're going to have their professional careers impacted. And obviously, gamers are not, some like insane gamers, and of course, no defense on any of that. These people should absolutely never be defended. Go out of their way to issue threats, harass the fuck out of people, and cause absolute grievances for anybody involved. Now, you can read this whole letter for yourself, but of course, why are we mentioning a 3-year-old Reddit post today? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mick Gordon, after 2 years of straight-up harassment and having his professional career impacted, made what is one of the longest actual posts and responses, filled to the fucking brim with some of the most insane receipts that you will ever actually see. Now, of course, the reason why Mick would do this is because obviously when your professional career is impacted and you have a letter like this floating around from one of the actual people behind it, id Software, you need to have some response to it. So, of course, here you can see the statement is issued in response to that actual post on Reddit. Marty lied about the circumstances surrounding the Doom Eternal soundtrack and used disinformation and innuendo to blame me entirely for its failure. Afterwards, he offered me a 6-figure settlement, a gag order to never speak about it. Marty's Reddit post severely impacted both my professional and personal reputation. In releasing the statement, I'm exercising my right to defend myself. Obviously, they're not trying to issue a hate campaign, and I just want to straight for the record. This is not drama, okay? Drama is like stupid shit you'll find on T-channels on YouTube that means nothing. This is simply about doing what the right thing is, okay? Making sure people are paid what they're owed, and making sure none of them are overworked or mistreated, especially in the world of software, okay? That's just how it comes on to, ladies and gentlemen. That's just what the right thing to do actually is. So of course, when I look down into this post, it's a 58-minute read. Again, I would highly recommend you look into it, but the points of note were my response is lengthy and detailed to prevent vague statements, obviously. The statement is a direct response to Marty's false accusations. Privacy to maintain the anonymity of others. I've used collective nouns such as management, id Software, Bethesda, obviously for the people that are working in those specific sectors. You don't want to straight up name them. He's a contractor. Contracts are integral. In-game scores, video game music contracts. Again, you should read these as well too. These are very good, solid definitions, especially for this specific moment, okay? So of course, when I signed on, id Software handed me a music schedule that required 2 levels scored per month. Tight, although not impossible. But whoever dreamt up that plan did so in isolation because it quickly became apparent how disconnected it was from the game's actual development. Release was still 2 years away. The schedule, however, demanded I deliver a steady stream of final music immediately. One of the game's key features was music that closely matched gameplay, so aiming to produce finished music for levels still months away didn't make sense. If you ever played Doom, you'll understand that the soundtrack flows very much in tune with how the game is played whenever you're killing constant zombies and dealing actual damage to the hell, dwellings. That is all part of the Doom style, okay? Obviously, you can't develop music that works in tandem with the gameplay when the fucking gameplay part hasn't actually been developed. Game development happens in blocks and pieces, okay? You don't just have a functioning game in all the levels. Hell, when you're designing a game, you're usually designing the gameplay fundamentals before you even get to the idea of levels. There's people who are writing the levels to plot out before it even gets sent for map development. You get the point. Now, of course, inside this, he was basically showcasing exact emails Mick Gordon was sending to people on the team where they were actually straight up, again, these are dated all the way back in 2018. And of course, this is coming back off of the back of 5 other Bethesda published titles, Prey being one of them. This felt like familiar territories. Most projects begin with an idealistic timetable, conjured up with a crystal ball, but that fails to predict the unforeseeable difficulties associated with cutting-edge game development. Typically, it's not a problem. The team adapts to the changing circumstances by adjusting the schedule. And of course, they pointed out the issues, and then you got into the entire idea with Marty constantly striking down Mick's stuff. Marty struck it down. He rejected my belief that the current schedule was flawed and suggested my act of trying to do something about it was a sign of incompetence. Refusing to accept the reality of the situation, he threw the proposal back in my face and proceeded to tear me down for having the audacity to raise the issue. So, of course, from Mick Gordon to Marty Stratton, of course, he's responding back and forth to it. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, this is just not professional to have. Obviously, when you're working as a producer, I think what Marty is trying to do, at least what it seems like in this situation, is wring the out of independent contractors to get as much content out, even though the independent contractors have a good point to make. Obviously, Mick is not wrong in how this goes, and Marty should have adjusted to the schedule, or at least showcase some level of leeway to offer these people. Then, of course, you get into things like payment issues. So arguments over pay began when id Software threw out 2 entire suites written for Super Gornest and Mars Core shortly after the QuakeCon 2018 premiere. The rejection was bad enough. It meant scoring 4 levels simultaneously the following month. But id Software also denied payment on the notion they changed their mind and no longer liked the music. I argued music appearing at a promotional event constituted usage. How they could actually even fathomably believe that if they were not going to use that music in the game, but conveniently decided to use it to promote the game at one of their conventions and not pay the fucking guy behind it is baffling. Again, I don't understand how this works in a big company like id, but apparently, according to Mick, that's how it appeared to be. Then, of course, Mick also mentioned things like crunch, so blowouts, rejections, lack of approval, endless demands, marketing disruptions, and ambiguity over the actual state of progress translated to one thing: severe crunch. For a year now, I had sleeping in my studio away from home, surviving on microwave food, and spending long periods of time away from the family. Not only is this mentally and physically not okay, but ultimately, anytime crunch happens, it's literally the fault of the production teams behind it, okay? If you as a production planner cannot actually make sure that these timetables are met without absolutely sacrificing the health of your actual people working, you are a terrible planner in any capacity. I understand sometimes what'll happen is, unforeseen consequences arise or issues prop up, but if you can't plan and work and sort of readjust around that, it really shows to your incompetence, not the team working for you. For reasons I don't fully understand, he flatly denied me the contract and refused to do anything about the OST, saying he didn't want to cause a distraction. The collector's edition, a premium product sold for hundreds of dollars, was advertised with the expectation that buyers would receive a copy of Mick Gordon's actual soundtrack, but without a contract to actually produce the OST, there would be no OST to include. I was now under enormous pressure. Attaching my name to it meant I'd be held publicly accountable if it failed. Nobody involved in the announcement seemed to consider consumer protection laws. Very important. Promising a product that wasn't in production put id Software Bethesda at risk of violating those laws. An oversight that would have severe consequences in the months ahead. Now, of course, obviously, as you all know, Doom Eternal did eventually get delayed, and it made sense because at the time Fallout 76 was an absolute joke, and nobody at Bethesda wanted a repeat of any of that, and obviously they needed to get these issues hammered out. So at this point, Mick tells us that his financial situation was dire. The project had been my only source of income, and I couldn't afford to enter a dispute against the ZeniMax legal machine over money. Facing the possibility of not being paid for the last 10 months at all, I relented and carried out their final demands. I hadn't been paid anything in 10 months. That, ladies and gentlemen, is when you got a family to support and they're not paying you for a good year, that means the guy is dipping into his savings trying to cover everything. And then on top of that, you got to work on this game where obviously the entire vibe is completely opposite of what it should be. Insane stuff to read. Again, they didn't do any OST deals. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, all right, what it comes down to was he just kept on getting rejected and all this shit. Marty eventually at one point started bringing things like threats, so Marty Stratton to Mick Gordon. Marty's email stated, contrary to what Bethesda told me, that the April 16th date now was an absolute necessity. He said consumer protection laws in some territories meant anyone who purchased the collector's edition was entitled to a full refund if they didn't receive that shit by the 20th. It dawned on me that I was being threatened. Refunds meant financial losses. Marty was saying in his view, I was legally liable for any loss id Software suffered due to customers claiming refunds over a late OST. If it wasn't ready in 13 days, they would come after me. I did the numbers in my head and the thought was terrifying. I couldn't understand why Marty hadn't told me sooner. If I had been made aware of the consumer protection issue before signing the contract, I would have refused to do the OST. Again, complete mismanagement on the side of legal, and of course, even Marty Stratton trying to make sure this thing would work. But really, what was the biggest shot in the dark, of course, was the idea of an alternative OST that was actually in development for 6 months before Mick Gordon was brought on. Marty revealed to me that previously instructed lead audio designer Chad Mossholder make an alternative OST by cutting together songs using edited chunks of my in-game score. Obviously, he expressed to Marty the regret of the situation and my belief that working against each other didn't make any sense, especially considering the circumstances. I said we should pool our resources and work together towards a better outcome. He didn't respond. Instead, Chad contacted me 4 days later and said his album of edits was complete. He asked to hear it, and Chad sent 70 plus tracks. Now, if you go back to the open letter, Marty claimed that the decision to enlist Chad happened at the last minute. But the files Chad had sent, according to the metadata, was completely different. Of course, the exact metadata in this case shows that he began to work on that OST in 2019, August 2019, 6 months before any of these contracts were ever sent out. Now, this is where, honestly, like, Mick kind of drags Chad a little bit through. If you read through, like, the entire idea of the alternative OST, this section, he really is like, he hoped to use Chad's edit to basically expand onto it, but the content fell far short of expectation. Now, at this point, Chad is mentioned 42 times in this entire thread of or this entire like post, and none of it was actually there to really like give this man any sort of like credit on working. In fact, in a lot of these cases, in the final days, I did not have the time or budget to address the many problems in Chad's edits. Of course, they said they would release Chad's version instead. He told me to hand over anything. I could have protested, but it wouldn't have done any good. I voiced my anxieties over Chad's edits and hoped they had improved since the week before. Mick did not like Chad's work whatsoever. Of course, the last thing was really the final, like, stab in the dark, okay? Chad was credited as co-artist on these tracks, really pissed Mick off. Credit theft, the act of taking credit for someone else's work, is rampant in video game music. Chad didn't write, arrange, perform, record, or produce any of the music. He carried out a copy-paste job, cutting apart finished music and resaving it. For this, the proper credit would be considered music editor. Yet in some cases, such as Urdak and Dag Ronak, of course the tracks for the game, he did nothing but change the file name. Jesus Christ, ladies and gentlemen, that is not okay in any capacity. The final summation of the pack over here is insane, all right? Because what it comes down to, the most hurtful lie here, in a grubby move and without proof, Marty alleged I instigated a campaign of harassment targeting id Software employees, in a baseless claim that is a total lie. He directly accused me of making statements that led to vilify and attack an id employee. So again, what it comes down to, and this is the real damning shit, I haven't been paid for over half of Doom Eternal's music. The game includes more than double the music I was contracted to produce. Rejects, mock-ups, demos, many of which were never meant for public release. The Doom Eternal OST was a mess. It was announced with my name attached and made available for pre-order before I was contracted to produce it. Despite my alarm and constant appeals, Marty refused to do anything about the situation, leading to a 9-month delay before I could even work. And of course, then you get into the OST release. Their poor quality release immediately drew criticism, and a worried Marty personally asked me for assistance in addressing the situation. And then, of course, then it came to the Reddit, open letter that we read in the beginning of this, where it was apparently full of lies, disinformation, and innuendo, of course, related to Mick. And, of course, he mentions the 6-figure sum hush money payment, the gag order, which, again, if you're never in the wrong, never take a gag order. Now, of course, what was Bethesda's shitty response to this whole situation? Well, they made a 4-paragraph response to that 59-minute read. The recent post by Mick Gordon both mischaracterized and misrepresented the team at id Software, the development of Doom Eternal, Marty Stratton, and Chad Mossholder, with a one-sided and unjust account of an irreparable professional relationship. We are aware of all the details and history in this matter, and unequivocally support Marty, Chad, and the team at id. We reject the distortion of the truth and selective presentation of incomplete facts. We stand ready with full and complete documented evidence to disclose in an appropriate venue as needed. Are they talking about a potential lawsuit? Are they talking about taking this shit to court? When it comes to Bethesda and ZeniMax, that wouldn't actually even be surprising. But of course, obviously, there's two sides to this story. I just wish that they actually provided some of these, facts or documented evidence. Because let me tell you something. Fucking Mick came out with a full set of receipts on this. The fact that I'm just reading this sounds like full legalese. The statement posted online have incited harassment and threats of violence against Marty, Chad, and the id Software team. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is not drama. This is just simply trying to make sure people are owed what they are owed. Or just given what they're owed. And trying to right wrongs. Okay, this doesn't really have to create things like harassment or death threats. You should just try to right the wrongs that have been actually done. We remain incredibly proud of its previous collaboration with Mick Gordon and ask the fans refrain from reaching conclusions based on his account, and more importantly, from attacking any of the individuals mentioned on either side. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those stories where, when it comes to the video game industry, and it comes to crunch, and it comes to people getting screwed, this is the kind of stuff that impacts just game developers, game designers, anybody working in this industry as a whole. Look, I love video gaming, okay? I love AAA video gaming. Doom Eternal is a very good game. Hell, I praised Bethesda just a million times in this video for games like Prey. But when I play these video games, I want to ensure that the least amount of damage is done possible. Crunch is a huge problem in the video game industry. And the fact that there's blatant unprofessionalism that apparently happens when it comes to simple things like contracts or just hiring people to do a job for a specific video game is just something that's never okay. Honestly, for the fans involved, we love to support these developers. We love to support these games. But when people are actually being hurt in this case, like for Mick, who apparently wasn't paid for almost a year, that's just never okay. And for gamers, we should never accept that, period. Now, I don't know what's going to come out of this. Maybe Bethesda's going to right some wrongs, or maybe they'll double down and actually come out with their own set of evidence. The problem with this also is that this probably should have just been done private, but realistically, it couldn't have been, because at the end of the day, all right, by making this public, it started some level of a dialogue, and now Bethesda's put under the goddamn fire. And hopefully something gets done. Hopefully the right things get done. But ladies and gentlemen, let's see what's going on. This is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am